I'm from Fusion Broadband South Africa, and I've been invited here for this presentation on a Kenyan KeNOG after presenting at the KwaZulu-Natal KeNOG. And my presentation, as I'm going to go through it right now, and I'll start off by sharing my screen.
29, eh? Okay.
Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about is infrastructure management, and more particularly around Mikrotiks. And the first thing that I'm going to talk about is go through how infrastructure management should be done and how it should be done securely. So the first thing is, let me just give a background to myself. I've been working in networks since about the 1990s, and in 2018 I was a finalist in the IT Blog Awards for Cisco. That was my one claim to blogging fame, but I haven't yet 2019 and 2020 they haven't been very active with blogging awards. In any case, so I work for Fusion Broadband. It's a South African leg of an Australian company that does SD-WAN. We provide a software stack. We don't actually do any connectivity. We just provide the software. We actually, the of our SD-WAN is that we do.
Sorry, Ronald, may I interrupt? Can you just switch off your mics if you're not speaking at the moment?
Okay.
Not you. Just the
okay.
So that we can have the echo. Thank you.
Okay, great. So then we're quite big experts in cyber analytics, where we do a lot of automation and a lot of dashboards around the SD-WAN. We work a lot with numerous third-party firewalls in our solution, including something from Sweden called Clavista, which very few people know about, but the Swedish guys have got a law that prevents any backdoors or any type of compromise by a state authority of the software, which is quite unique in the world. Our customer base have got a large number of handovers with many types of routers, and many of those routers are Mikrotik routers. And that is with my that is where my integration with Mikrotik exists, is interacting with customers who have utilized Mikrotik routers on their sites as CPEs. During this integration, I'll talk to you about what the security problems are. So firstly, what is the problem? So as within any bit of software, Mikrotik does have vulnerabilities. And I'll give you this presentation that you can actually look at the links later on. But in the wild, there are numerous win boxes that have been compromised or are vulnerable to compromise. In actual fact, around the world, there are 600,000 Winbox interfaces open to the internet without restrictions, which would mean that basically anybody can go in, and if they feel like hacking, hack those interfaces, which is a very significant large amount. Of all the Mikrotiks in the world, only 15% of them are patched to the current levels. So 85% of Mikrotiks that are installed are on vulnerable versions. So Mikrotiks, and especially Winbox, is a very good vector in which you can compromise somebody. An excellent resource to find out and utilize for yourself, or actually see the problem. There's a internet site called Shodan. You can actually go and utilize that resource to mine information about what the compromises is and the extent of the compromises. You can, you can access their information for free, but if you pay a small amount of money, you can get all of the information. If you own an IP address space, you can actually get all of the information that they have about your IP address space and all systems, not only Mikrotiks that have been compromised, but anything else that's been compromised in your IP space. Africa, including South Africa, is a bit of a mess across all ISPs. But in reality, Africa isn't the worst. The worst is South America. And in many of the botnets that attack many of the compromised systems are actually from South America, or a large portion of them all. So how do we actually solve the problem? There's a very simple way of doing it, and this is the slide that I explain it with. So typically, if you've got a Mikrotik router as a CPE, you've got a data plane which you connect to the internet, and that is the plane that the user goes through the Mikrotik, through the ISP into the internet, and that is the one where they do web browsing, email, or any other application. Now, when you have a Mikrotik and you just configure it by default, you can manage it via the data plane. But that is not a very good idea, because that's where you end up in one of those lists of 600,000 Mikrotiks that is open to the internet without restrictions and that can be compromised. So what a person's got to do is put in a management plane. The management plane is specifically a separate plane which you utilize to access the Mikrotik. There are many ways in which you can implement this management plane, and I'll demonstrate a few. So the concept of a management plane is that you have a very specific network that has got access to the management interface of the Mikrotik, and nothing else can manage it except that. So if you've got a person who's trying to hack you via the data plane, he will immediately not be able to get to that Mikrotik via the data plane anymore. He can only get via the management plane. And on the management plane, you ensure that the only person who can get to the management plane is an authorized user, and you make that certain that it's locked down to that only the users that need access to the management plane can get to it, and that it's not open on the internet. So what is the mitigated and what is the easiest way to implement a management plane? So the easiest way to do it is to whitelist an IP that will manage the infrastructure on the device itself. The infrastructure, and in this case it would be Mikrotiks, but you can do it for anything else. You put filters that will drop all other IPs except the ones that is whitelisted to manage the infrastructure. What I do, and what is a good idea then, is that you actually, instead of whitelisting your home or office IP address, you install a Linux box. I use Debian Buster, and you actually associate the whitelisted IP with that Linux box. Typically, if you are looking for cloud services, you can utilize the cheapest VPS, and that will work. The actual VPS that I use for this actually has only got it's the cheapest one available, and it's only got one CPU, limited memory, limited hard disk space, because the purpose is not to have a machine that's got great processing power. All it is just a management layer to make certain that you get to this box, and this box is whitelisted to manage the infrastructure. At a very simplistic level, once you've implemented a box like that, you can get to all of your infrastructure using something like SSH, and you can use certificates to make certain that you are connect securely between the VPS and the infrastructure. But unluckily, I use a Windows desktop, and I like using a Windows desktop. Hello? And I like using Windows tools. I mean, Winbox is a Windows tool. So then how do we actually enable that? Because I don't want to use SSH. So let me just quickly show you, and you should all be familiar with this. How do you whitelist an IP on a Mikrotik, you actually go into the IP services list. You make certain that you disable all other services. So currently over here, you'll see the API, FTP, SSH, those services are actually enabled. You must disable all of them. And on the IP services Winbox, you need to actually state specifically the IP addresses that you are coming from. So in this example, I've got a private IP address, which isn't routable on the internet, so nobody will be able to utilize that as a compromise unless you're in that range. And then also the actual IP address of the VPN concentrator is put on there. And once you do that, Winbox is only available from those particular interfaces. And I'll take you through to the next step of how I do it. So what I use is I use something called Soft Ether as a VPN concentrator. So on the VPS, I install a VPN concentrator. And that VPN concentrator allows you to actually get into the actual VPS via a VPN concentrator, and it then assumes via NAT the IP address of that VPN concentrator. So as soon as you get onto the VPN concentrator, you can get access to the actual Mikrotik's Winboxes natively. So you can then just start utilizing it and as if you were on that IP address. The reason I use Soft Ether, it is a VPN tool. It was originally developed in Japan, but it is got an excellent management interface, which I'll show you now, which is very easy to configure and utilize. The problem with many of the VPN tools that are out there is they're not always that easy to set up. They might have lots of text file configurations, and some of them, if you make a syntax error in the configuration, it takes you hours to figure out what you've done wrong and get it sorted out. While when you utilize something like Soft Ether, it's very easy and very good to be able to manage it. It saves a lot of time. So I've chatted basically everything about how this VPN concentrator works. The Soft Ether can actually be utilized as a generic work from home access. It's got all of those abilities, but I'm just talking about it from a security perspective and managing infrastructure. Before I go into the demo and show you how the solution is that and how it works utilizing a VPN infrastructure. One of the biggest compromises and threat vectors that people use when they create botnets is the DNS function that's in the Mikrotik. So if you can avoid using the built-in DNS of the Mikrotik, avoid it. Typically, I don't use the built-in DNS. I use something like Quad9 or Cloudflare. Here where we are, those services are hosted at Terraco, so the performance and speed is very good. If you are going to use passwords, make certain that they are at least 14 characters long, and use a master password. The longer your password characters are, the more time it will take for anybody to actually, when they're trying to hack your systems, the more time it will take before they actually get any success. When you get to 14 characters, you're looking at it's going to take anybody a couple of years to try and brute force your device. While if you down to 5, 6, so it can take an hour or so and you're in, maybe even less. The important thing, and one of the as I said, is only 16% or 15% in actual fact of Mikrotiks are at the latest firmware revision across the world. So what you need to do is update and back up your configs. So there's a very nice little program called Unimyth. It's very cost effective, and you've got a limited number of free devices that you can use with it. and it will allow you to automatically upgrade the firmware of your devices in a bulk manner, and it will also allow you to back up your configs. So if you're looking after a large number of Mikrotiks, it will be very tedious to actually do the firmware updates one by one. So a tool like Unimus is actually very good to automate that and make that happen fast. So let me do the demo quickly. Okay, so here you can see I'm actually currently attached to a VPN, and I'm actually on this VPN at the moment. The VPN that I use is with Soft Ether, so this is the client that it has, but it also integrates natively into Windows. The management interface is a graphic management interface, and surprisingly enough, there aren't many VPN or open source ones that actually have a proper management interface that is easy to use and that's graphic. So here you can see I've got it set up. It allows you to add users. It allows you to specify password. It allows you to use certificates. All of the management is actually via this interface. So it's very point and click to set it up. You don't have to bother with config files. It also gives you logs. And it's very good with its ability to be very stable. I mean, the one that I'm using, I've never had a problem with its stability. So what happens here? Let me just open up a web browser quickly. Okay, so this is my public address, and this is the IP address of the VPS that I'm using. So now whenever I get to anything, I've got that whitelisted on the Mikrotiks that I utilize or any of the other infrastructure that I utilize, and it allows me then to log in automatically. I'll just, somebody needs to mute their mic. So for example, I've gotten to this Mikrotik via that whitelisted IP address. The thing about this is that you can actually do any infrastructure in exactly the same way. So if you've got Cisco routers, if you've got Linux boxes, if you've got switches, you can do exactly the same mechanism that you do to securing the Mikrotiks. You can do with those devices as well. I'm not going to talk about how you configure each one of them to do that, but most of them have got the ability to whitelist a particular IP address where you're coming from. So I'll just give you an example of. So this is a Linux box that's sitting in Cape Town. And the only way that I can get into the Linux box and into the CLI is via the whitelisted IP address. It rejects any connections from anybody else. Oh, I got muted. Okay, so then the next thing that I want to show you is that here in South Africa, there's a company called Power Cloud that has been developing some software for Mikrotik. They've been specifically developing SD-WAN software for Mikrotik. And one of the products that they've got is a version of Winbox called Powerbox. And what that does is it allows you to utilize their software to actually overcome many of the problems that you experience, and you don't have to actually then do it manually. It will do it for you automatically. So what they've got is that they have got a password repository for you, like something like LastPass, and they have a VPN connection that's established to the Mikrotik. So where I do my management plane, and I'll just quickly go back to it. I'll go back to the so when we look at this management plane, what they do is instead of having a whitelisted IP address, they create this management plane by opening up a VPN connection between the Mikrotik and the whitelisted IP address. And that allows them to do a more advanced way of whitelisting, because what you have with a Mikrotik that's sitting on a CG NAT, for example, is that you cannot get to that from the internet in any case. What this allows you to do is open up via the VPN client that's on the Mikrotik, open up the connection from the client side to the VPN concentrator, and then that is another mechanism of doing it. It's more advanced and more secure. And let me go back to the box. So this is the interface of the product that they call Powerbox. And effectively what they do is, all you need to do is you can have hundreds of Mikrotiks here. And what you do is you click on one of them, it actually opens up Winbox. It puts in the password, and then it actually connects to the device that you want managed. So what this does is it does your password management for you, and it does the VPN management for you for the Mikrotik in a seamless fashion, so you don't have to do it and build it manually. So it basically automates the whole process, which if you've got large amounts of Mikrotiks, it's very useful. You can build it yourself. It's just going to take you quite a while to do it. I've always been building this myself, but I haven't had hundreds and hundreds of Mikrotiks. I've only had a couple of dozen, so it hasn't been that big a deal for me. But I can see how this is going to help you when you've got a very large real estate of Mikrotiks to manage. So what this product will now do is, for every one of your Mikrotiks, you can come to the dashboard and you can open up, and it will open up Winbox, and you can get to it automatically, and all your Mikrotiks will be secure. So that is the end of the demonstration. So if I just need to get back. Okay, so now we can actually go to the questions and answer sessions.
Awesome, thank you. We already have one question in the chat. Musa asked whether the vulnerability, involving, sorry, let me just find it, where you mentioned at the beginning that you can use Inbox to access a router from an unauthorized IP. Is this vulnerability still in the version 7 of Router OS?
So Router 7 OS will have vulnerabilities because it's based upon a Linux kernel. And one of the fundamental things about it is that the current version 7 of Router OS doesn't have that same amount of vulnerabilities. No.
Okay.
But you can't discount it, because in a month's time somebody might discover something.
Yeah.
But it would be a good idea to, regardless, secure your Mikrotiks using the exact same methodology.
Okay. Anyone with any more questions? You can share them on the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and be able to ask them.
Okay, so somebody's asked about the list of vulnerabilities. So the list of vulnerabilities is actually quite readily available. I think they're on the Mikrotik website. Let me quickly look over here. Let me just share again quickly.
Sure.
Okay. When you go into Google and you type Mikrotik CVE, the CVE is the definition by which vulnerabilities are registered, and they then give you a number. And typically what happens is then the vendor utilizes that number to track and fix their software. So if you look at the Mikrotik vulnerabilities, you can see the number of vulnerabilities that have been here since 2012. The big vulnerabilities started in 2019 when the people started leveraging Mikrotiks for botnets, and this year has been a relatively bad one. Mostly people have been utilizing and building Mikrotiks into botnets that are doing denial of service attacks. So a denial of service attack is where they overload your actual IP address with traffic so that you effectively are unable to utilize the internet because the traffic being sent to your network is being killed off. The amount of denial of service attack has varied up and down around the network. I mean, South Africa in 2019, we had quite a bit of it happening within the country. It's less now, but it still carries on happening. So if you want to get the Mikrotik vulnerabilities, just go onto Google and search for Mikrotik CVE, and you can actually go and you can list each one of these, and it will actually give you a detail of what they are. So for an example, here is the list of the ones specifically around denial of service. They ranked from 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst. Typically, you should only get worried when there's an 8, 9, or 10. So in this case, there's a 6.8, which is the highest one. So it's not that bad. But in any case, the big issue around these vulnerabilities is that it's important to update to the latest firmware. And what I would suggest you do is get to at least the latest firmware version on LTS, which is the long-term support. It is very stable, it works, and you're not likely to get hit by somebody trying to hack it. Okay.
There's a question in the...
So the next question is about securing Mikrotiks hosted locally and not accessed on remotely. So if you have got a Mikrotik that isn't accessing the internet, you could, the only thing that you have to do, and which is very easy, is if you're using private IP addresses, you make certain that in your Winbox access list for the service of Winbox, you make certain that it only accesses the RFC 1918 local IP addresses. So you restrict it to 192.168.10.0 and 172.16 ranges. And then the reason for that is just as a fail-safe in case somebody on the internet would actually break into your network and get to it, because one of the assumptions that you have is that if you're saying your Mikrotik doesn't get to the internet, it won't prevent somebody who is compromised a laptop or a workstation or a server that does have connection to the internet from getting to your Mikrotik. But regardless of whether you have it locally or remotely, the only way to properly secure it is by putting an access list on Winbox. The Mikrotiks aren't like some of the older generations of Cisco's or legacy firewalls where you can use a console rollover cable. Console rollover cable is probably the most secure way of doing things, because the only way you can access it is if you've got physical access. But that isn't a viable strategy if you're managing a large amount of networks, because it's just not a viable solution to do it that way anymore.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned something about automatically upgrading firmware, and I don't know if that would be advisable. Do you mean automatically it helps you deploy it, or do you mean I'll set a time, I'm gonna let some firmware upgrades happen and be done with it? Is there a safe way to automatically?
Well, the Unimus software does a good job of it. And your big problem around it is, as you pointed out, there's always a probability that the software upgrade might go wrong. And you've got to test and make certain that the software update that you're going to do on that version of Mikrotik is going to work. The alternative of not doing an upgrade is worse than the probability of a failure happening. So if you are doing them and you're doing it for the first time, I wouldn't suggest that you do 1,000 routers for the first time in one big shot. Rather do them in small bundles until you're totally familiar with the process and making certain that the process works correctly for the devices that you have, and then you can start doing them in bulk. So start off with testing it with a small group and making certain that the small group of software operates and works well, and then start increasing it until you can do a bulk. But you are correct. It is a change management process. You've got to test it and you've got to make certain that it works. And the thing to remember is the service degradation that you get out of being hacked by a vulnerability is a lot worse than having to have a failed firmware upgrade where you have to go and reset the device or swap the device out. So the question here is, how secure is the provider of the remote management? You correct, the provider of the remote management is himself vulnerable if he doesn't secure the platform that they're on. So what you've got to do, make certain about the provider, is that the provider is in a cloud service that is inherently itself secure. And you can ask them typically what they do to secure themselves. So, for example, when you're in a cloud provider like Amazon onboards you with a certain amount of due diligence to make certain that you are secure. And so that's the same type of thing that you're going to do. You have to make certain that your access and that the remote provider himself is secure, because you are correct in the context that you are yourself vulnerable. The difference here is that you have got a lot smaller of a threat vector to protect on that entry point. It's like a choke point. For example, with the coronavirus that's around here, if you've got 10 airports coming into a country and you're trying to prevent people from coming into the country, you have to deploy people to stop people at 10 points. If you tell everybody you can only come in via one airport and that's the only way in and out of the country, you only have to look after that one airport, and it's a lot easier and simple, and you can have a very high very highly secure process to make certain that that one entry point is well policed. While each time you add an additional entry point, the probability of the breach of those entry points becomes larger. So if you, for example, have limited your entry points to which you can get to the management interface via a management plane, it's a lot better than having everybody on the internet able to access your device, because the probability of you being compromised in the latter situation is a lot higher than from the managing plane. But to answer your question about when you select a provider that is doing remote management for you, and this is actually true for anything. If you are utilizing a provider to keep your configs for you, you have to do your due diligence, and they have to prove their security to you. So they have to effectively state that they follow a certain methodology to make certain that they're not vulnerable. So any layer 2 security considerations for locally hosted Mikrotik devices. This is a very interesting question, because I've encountered it a lot of times. Layer 2 and Mikrotiks can be compromised very easily with somebody who doesn't look after their infrastructure. If you've got layer 2 access to a Mikrotik, you're probably got a very good chance of hacking it. Now, when you are creating an ISP network and you've got customers with multiple Mikrotiks, and you typically have got an access plane, and people are coming in via that access plane, the first thing that you must do is do something called client isolation. And what that means is that via that access layer, one client cannot get to another client unless they go via the access router. So if you're on layer 2 and you can see somebody else on the Mikrotik at layer 2, then that is a bad thing. So what you got to do is every switch out there, every ISP switch out there has got something called client isolation. Every base station that gets shipped also gets shipped with client isolation. You got to make certain that you have client isolation switched on. It can be fiber, wireless, anything. That's the first thing to make certain. Then the clients can't hack each other. The next thing to do is make certain that people have got an ability to manage their links. So what often happens if you do not have client isolation, as an example, if your user plugs in his cable of his LAN into the actual access part of the ISP's network, not only does that mean that the guy next to him, who's got a service next to him on the same access network, could previously see a CPE. When a guy makes a mistake like that, he can see your whole internal network. And I've seen that happen often. I mean, I've seen a government organization that will remain nameless, where I was having where the access network was having problems, and I logged the problem with the ISP, and they were going on to say, no, I don't see a problem, and et cetera, et cetera. And then what I did is I logged on using Wireshark to go and see what was going on in that access network. And I saw the internal traffic of this government department on the access network, which means that they'd actually plugged in their LAN cable instead of the WAN cable into the access network. And so that is a very dangerous thing to do, because you're behind their firewall. You can attack anything on their network. So the important thing around when you do these things, and especially with client installations, it is very important to try and do some color coding. So it's a very simple thing, but make certain that when you ship a WAN cable to it, that it's a particular color. So make it yellow, blue, green, and make certain that, for example, the majority of LAN cables are always gray or white. So when you're speaking to a customer, they're not that clued up always, that they're actually plugging the red cable or the yellow cable into the WAN port and into your access network, and that provides a measure of you making of them making a silly mistake, and it also allows you to actually manage the situation easier, because it's a very common thing. I would suggest that if you've got a correct access network and you've done the basics about securing it, then you've mitigated a large amount of the layer 2 problems. But the thing is that typically when a person's got physical access to a device, you typically can't do much about stopping them. But yes, layer 2 is a very important consideration for an ISP to do, and that is around making certain that your access network itself is secured. You mustn't assume that because you're providing internet and anybody can get to the internet anywhere, that the same rules apply on your access network. Your access network, your customer, the CPE, the Mikrotik on the CPE should only be able to get to your access router. Clients shouldn't be able to access each other. I hope I answered that question. Yes? No?
I think you did.
Yeah, so a very easy way to see whether the access network is working correctly is when you fire up Winbox and you go to IP neighbors. And if you go to IP neighbors and you can see hundreds of Mikrotiks there, then the people haven't applied client isolation, and it's a bad thing. I mean, there are in South Africa, it's quite a common problem. There are some well-known networks where you can log on to your Mikrotik and you do a CP, you do an IP neighbors, and you see hundreds of devices. Those devices are all liable to very easy hacking. So if a person's got time, you've got the address, you can just look at the IP neighbors, you look at the version of the Mikrotik OS, you go to the Mikrotik CVE and you say, oh, okay, this has got the Mikrotik vulnerability. You download the Winbox vulnerability and you compromise the Mikrotik. It's that simple. You actually don't even need a password or a user ID for that. You can just do it with a bit of software which you download as an exe.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Ronald? Maybe in the meantime, while people think of their last questions before we close, as this router OS 7 has been much awaited, has it delivered most of what are the key things it's delivered that people have been waiting for a long time from Mikrotik to resolve or to upgrade or update that would be useful for the community to know?
So there's lots of people that have been talking about router OS 7. And so the current revision of Mikrotik runs on Linux kernel version 3. So the new one that they are releasing runs on Linux kernel version 5. Now, Linux kernel version 5 has got a huge amount of networking updates in it. The updates in it are extremely extensive, and they've got new mechanisms of quality of service. They've got new mechanisms of queuing. They've got new mechanisms of doing firewalls. So it's basically a rewrite because of that reason. It's a rewrite because the functionality and feature sets that are there are totally different from version 5 to version 3 of the Linux kernel. So I think a person would have to see whether what you are currently utilizing on your Mikrotik has got functionality parity in version 7 before you apply it. Now, the thing with it is that you might use a current version and it might not be fully working, but there are a bucket load of new features that are coming in version 7 which you can utilize. And that would be the game changer. Is if you've got a business case for those new features, then use them. But yeah, I can see how they've why they've taken so long, because from version 3 to version 5 is about 10 years of kernel development. So Mikrotik sort of like stayed on version 3 for far too long. And now they have to catch up on 10 years worth of kernel development. And it's not an overnight thing.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you for that response. From the floor, do we have any final questions? Kevin asks, is there RPKI in Mikrotik now?
Yes, there is in Router OS version 7. It's not in the old releases.
Okay.
And it doesn't, my understanding is it's not going to be in the version 6 release.
Cool, thank you.
So what you know, the RPKI, the important thing to remember there is only use a IP transit provider that's got RPKI that at least protects you. So I mean, if you, but you know, in South Africa now here we've got the majority of IP transit providers have transitioned to something that's RPKI. So for an example, Cogent's got it, Hurricane Electric has got it, Seacom has got it, Work Online have got it. So most of the tier ones on IP transit do have it. And if you're using an IP transit provider, make certain that they got RPKI, although you yourself don't implement it. It's actually more important for your IP transit provider to have it than you yourself to have it if you're running a local ISP in a localized region. It is important for you to have it as well. And when you get the opportunity to implement it, implement it. But on Mikrotik version 6, you're not there yet. But it isn't a big train smash if your tier 1 can confirm that they've got it and that they're utilizing it. The probability of threat is reduced significantly. I would actually say your IP transit provider having RPKI versus you having RPKI is a bigger percentage of threat mitigation than you doing it yourself. It's like saying, you know, if you've got somebody standing at as a guard at your front door of your building, it's a lot better than the guard standing at the office door inside your floor, inside your office, you know, 10 stories up.
But it's better than no one standing anywhere.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, that's what I would say. If your IP transit provider doesn't provide RPKI, you must fire them.
Probably. Yeah, but I would say as a minimum, at least sign your prefixes and make sure that you've created your ROAs so that they can actually be validated, even if you're not doing validation on your own network.
Correct.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, cool. I don't see any further questions in the chat. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Kevin to close the meeting for us. And remind everyone that we do have a mailing list that we have, as well as a Signal group that you're able to join and interact with the rest of the other network operators within Kenya. So I'm just going to quickly share those in the chat, and then you'll be able to use those links to join the Signal group as well as the mailing list. So over to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Michelle. First, thanks very much to Ronald for taking time to lead the tutorial. I didn't join all of it, but I've joined the final half hour. I think I've seen a lot of interaction. So thank you very much for taking time to take us through Mikrotik security. So Michelle has shared the links. Welcome to join our mailing list and our Signal group. We are still a growing community. And if you have any suggestions on other topics you'd like to see, please do let us know. And of course, thanks very much, Michelle, for moderating this session.